All right, hello everyone. This video is going to be a bit of an introduction to the OpenExo Wiki. We'll be covering some of the information contained here, as well as how to navigate through the documentation. Before we get started, it's worth noting that the main feature of this wiki is the build guide for OpenExo. It's the build guide for the base configuration of the exoskeleton, which is the hip assistance only configuration. The build guide is going to be located within hardware and then hip, and you can see OpenExo build guide here. Additionally, it's worth noting that the documentation for having the PCB for OpenExo manufactured is located within electrical and CAN motor PCB. We also support the Maxon series of motors, but we currently don't have any end effector designs compatible with the Maxon motors. The purpose of adding support for the Maxon series of motors as of right now is to allow for a broader range of options for those who might want to customize the OpenExo platform down the road. Additionally, work is also being done to design end effectors compatible with those Maxon motors. But assuming that you want to follow the build guide to a T and build the base configuration of OpenExo and then develop onward from there, you'll go into the OpenExo build guide and you'll be using the CAN motor PCB. So to get started, you'll notice that we've got these three introductory documents here. We've got a getting started page, a safety overview page, and an updates page. You want to check the updates page fairly frequently, as anytime that we add new components to OpenExo or release new designs or provide fixes or optimizations, the main information on those fixes and optimizations will be located here. And if there are any relevant files or sections that get added to the OpenExo wiki, the location to the relevant files or documents will be located within the Updates tab. And then you'll notice also that we have a tab for hardware, electrical, and software. We'll start with the hardware tab. Within each of these tabs, we'll have a Start Here section that'll provide you some information for what's contained in the section, and often where you should start in that section, and then some further information on the contents of the section. So we'll start with HIP. If you go into the HIP tab, this is where we have the OpenExo build guide for the base configuration of OpenExo, and then within there, the build guide is divided into a few subsections, including fabrication, mechanical assembly, electrical assembly. And then in addition, we've got a bill of materials for the base configuration of OpenExo, download for the SolidWorks assembly of it, and then we've got some relevant files here, such as the plastic mount template, which is mentioned within the build guide and is the location of this file is pointed to within the build guide. And then also within hardware, we've got the Bowden cable assembly. The main feature of this tab is the Bowden transmission guide, which is a guide for building a Bowden cable transmission system that allows you to provide assistance to other joints using that transmission system with a motor mounted on the belt. We currently don't have our own open source end effector design, but the hope is that releasing the design for the Bowden transmission system allows users to have a good starting off point. And then additionally, it's mentioned in the build guide that the Bowden transmission system is compatible with a variety of motors. Those motors are listed here with their respective bills of materials. And then moving on into the electrical tab, you'll notice that we've also got a Start Here tab for this section. And then we've got tabs for a CAN motor PCB and a Maxon motor PCB. Assuming you're using the base configuration of OpenExo or just using the CubeMars AK series of motors in general, you're going to want to use the CAN motor PCB. And you'll notice here that we've got some documentation, a guide for having it manufactured, and then the necessary files for having it manufactured. And again, assuming you're following the build guide to a T or are even just using the AK motors, this is the PCB that you're going to want to use. This is the PCB that's referenced in the build guide. Additionally, however, we've also got a Maxon PCB. This section actually covers two separate Maxon PCBs, one of which supports single motor use, the other supports dual motor use. So one is for if you're using unilateral one Maxon motor, the other is if you're using bilateral two Maxon motors. And then additionally, there is some documentation for configuring the Maxon driver boards because these do require separate driver boards, unlike the CubeMars AK motors. And then similarly to the CAN motor PCB, there are the necessary files for having the Maxon PCB manufactured. And then lastly, within the electrical section, we've also got a tab for integrating new sensors. Recently, with one of our own devices, we were adding some Arduino Nanos to the exoskeleton to serve as IMUs. And we thought it might be nice to include some documentation on what we did to include those nanos. That way, we could have some extra documentation for users to reference in the event that they want to add their own new sensors, and they could have an example of what that process looks like. And then lastly, we've got the software tab, which just includes a link to our software documentation.